Hi, we are on. We're all good.
And GrassRoots is up and running?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you guys all for your patience as we worked through that. I was getting some feedback. I don't know if that was the technical or not, but just if you're not talking, please keep yourself muted if possible. And we will call this APCHA meeting of 11/18/2020 to order. Cindy, would you read the roll?
I can do the roll, yes. Carson?
Here.
George? George?
Here.
Great. John?
Here.
Rick? Rick? Rick?
Is that Rick? I'm here.
Yes, yes. Okay. Kelly?
Yes.
Skippy?
Present.
Great. And David? All right, it looks like David's not on. All right,
I have not. David.
we are good to go.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I apologize, Bethany. I forget Cindy is on a much-deserved vacation. Hope she's having a great time. It's just reflexive. Beautiful. So we're going to get going today. Today, the meat of our agenda is going to be finalizing our work plan. But as always, we will start with public comment. I know we have a few on the line. This is 3 minutes to share anything not on the agenda. And I don't have a roll, so I would ask that a member of the public speak up, state your name for the record, and I will let you know when your 3 minutes is up, and then we will move to the next. So, Lee, I know you're on the line. Do you want to be first?
Oh, sorry. Sarah actually called earlier, so if she can go first, that would be great.
Got it. I did not have a list. So, Sarah Sachs, yeah, please state your name for the record and let us know what's on your mind.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm Sarah Sachs.
Hi, I'm Harrison Sachs. APCHA board members and staff, I'm Harrison Sachs. Okay. And we have kids who are 10 and 14. We wanted to address you as we have heard you're considering implementing standards for sellers. We are presently under contract to buy 403 Lassay Court, an RO home. We wanted to relay some of our experiences in purchasing this property in the hope that the process can be made more equitable to future buyers. This property has had years of deferred maintenance and 2 years where it's at completely unoccupied. We have had the home inspected by home inspectors, plumber, a general contractor, and a radon mitigation specialist to give reports on the home. The house needs a boiler replacement and significant heating system and mechanical work.
We lost your audio, guys. I think you are muted.
There we go.
Any idea where I was?
Yeah.
This property has had years of deferred maintenance and 2 years where it sat completely unoccupied. We have had the home inspected by home inspectors, plumbers, a general contractor, and a radon mitigation specialist to give reports on the home. The house needs a boiler replacement and significant heating system and mechanical work. We as buyers have real concerns about the safety of the boiler, worry about not having heat this winter, and we may have to address leaking from the radiant heat system and leaking from the snowmelt system for the steep driveway. As well, the deck off the home has structural issues from long-term moisture penetration into the deck, and the railing is failing off the entire exposed area of the deck, leaving our children potentially exposed to a significant fall. The home has other livability issues with carpet that is 25 years old, a leaking plumbing issue, holes in the drywall in several places, and radon gas higher than the EPA threshold to mitigate. At present, the seller is refusing to address any of these items. As a buyer, it is extremely frustrating to be in the position where a seller who benefited from this subsidized property for many years is claiming they have no responsibility to sell the home in a minimum livable condition. We would encourage you to make changes to the program that require sellers to have some minimum standards when they sell, in particular to have to address items that are considered health and safety issues. We feel it is an unreasonable burden that all these items should fall to a purchaser. In our case, we also ask that if the seller will not give any credit to fix the major health and safety items, that APCHA staff allow these items that we will have to pay for out of our pocket to be added to our original cost basis. We are both available to give more in-depth details with our experience we are going through and the many issues with this property. We both thank you for our time.
Thank you guys very much for bringing forth constructive and important feedback. And it sounds like you've been in touch with staff, but I would just ask that you guys stay in touch so that when we take on the review of these items, which it looks like we will be doing, that you can come and give testimony or another way pass along your information.
Happy to do that.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, Lee, did you want to go next? Lee, you are muted right now, assuming that you are cleverly retitled.
Well, it disconnected me for a while. The host said it refused to let me in the meeting.
Well, I'm glad that you got back in constructively, and in 3 minutes, the floor is yours.
My name is Lee Mulcahy. I'm grateful for many, many things. My neighbor who lives a block away, Kelly McNicholas Curry, one of the Board of County Commissioner representatives, said it was laughable that Lee Mulcahy complained about you guys meeting in executive session. Well, lo and behold, you're meeting on one in a secret session tonight. And guys, right now we're in a lawsuit, several, and Rick Head is part of that lawsuit. He works, I think, still for the Aspen skiing company, and he has participated in executive sessions and others for his own benefit and promotion in the ski company. And it's no secret that the Crown family does not love the Mulcahy family. And Rick's refusal to recuse himself is shameful. Secondly, I'm also grateful so I don't talk about things you guys have already read. Did everybody read the article from Andrew Scott in the Aspen Daily News the other day? Can I get a thumbs up if anyone read it?
It's not going to be a Q&A, but you can talk about the article.
Okay. So today, Paul Minter, who used to work for the city of Aspen, stated, last week, Aspen Daily News guest columnist Andrew Scott, in his November 14th column, wrote, "How will the curtain close on the APCHA drama?" And he took issue with APCHA to task for inconsistently handling 3 roughly contemporaneous rule enforcement issues. Anyway, I'm also grateful to God and the community for the love and support, for the people. You guys have three? I heard that it's 3,300 units, households that are under your tyranny in a town of 6,788. Is that true? Okay, you probably want to answer that question. But you know what the United States District Court said yesterday? Chief Judge Philip Brimmer, pursuant to the mandate of the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, docket number 73, filed on November 12th, this civil action be reinstated. This is from yesterday, guys. And you got an attorney that's going to advise you in a little secret session tonight. Well, good for you. But do you know anything about the history of this valley? Because I know several of you have moved here recently.
But Tom, 3 minutes, just so you know.
I'm sorry?
You've got about 15 seconds left. I just wanted to let you know so you could finish the thought.
Okay, Mr. Fashion Model. I would like to say that shame on you for your meeting in secret session and you won't give me more than 3 minutes. The Aspen Times has never covered any of the lawsuits against your organization that we've been successful on. And the United States 10th Circuit Court of Appeals is one under the Supreme Court. So, you know, he may not talk about that tonight, but he was investigated for dishonesty. Dishonesty, Skippy, by none other than the Colorado Supreme Court's Attorney Regulation Council. And the history, his pattern, is very, very evident in basalt. And if you look at that, I'm sorry?
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate you showing up. Thank you for the compliment. And I do hope you stick around for this open public meeting as a spectator, which you are always able to do. So thank you for your time. All right, I'm looking for other public comments. I see Ms. Spector. Are you here for public comment? Or I'll ask anyone else who wants to give public comment to speak up at this time, or we will close this section of the meeting. Okay. Hearing none then, thank you to everyone who is here to speak. We appreciate it. It does help us as a board. So we'll close that section and move to executive director comments. So Diane, or a member of staff, do you have anything to share with us tonight?
I do. May I share my screen?
You may.
And thanks to Maddie. Maddie is flying solo today, and she is. Are you able to see a slide that says APCHA interim director comments? Great. Maddie's flying solo tonight on over at the BOCC for tonight's meeting. Cindy is with us, even though I consider it a testament to her commitment to this organization that she's here on vacation, and a failure of mine as a supervisor to get her to take vacation. So with that, the comments tonight are pretty much, sorry, cattail in the mouse does not work. The executive director recruitment updates, we are moving along rapidly. Thanks to Phyllis for being part of the search committee for the recruiter. We reviewed all 6 proposals from national firms, narrowed it down to 3. We interviewed one of the 3 Monday, and we'll interview the other 2 on Friday. And that is, I will tell you, staff is in. I'll add to this that staff.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press *6
right
to
now.
unmute.
We are in the home stretch. I'm very excited.
You are
that,
unmuted.
Maddie and Nicole, 2 of our admin front desk do everything folks are taking the lead on the help desk, and Bethany and Cindy and Andrew and I are working a lot with them on that. But we do expect to be providing a very high level of service to the community, and I'm super excited. And I was talking with one of the APCHA board members today and mentioned that it's been interesting that COVID's given us an opportunity to really kind of test out a lot of these remote service opportunities. And I think with the addition of HomeTrack, we'll actually be bringing a higher level of service to our community. So with that, Mr. Mayor, if there are any questions, sorry, Mr. Chair, if there are any questions?
Any board members have questions? And again, I apologize. I'm on half a screen today, so I can only see one of you at a time. So just please use your little digi hands. I am not seeing any questions, Diane. Diane, my question is, now that we're down to 3, what does that review or interview process look like?
So for recruiters, it's pretty much figuring out who do we think has the best methodology, the best experience, and the best fit for us. It's been interesting talking to the first recruiter about that actually has a lot of housing experience and has even worked with agencies that do not have the capital asset development portion. So that's been quite interesting. And we are, in addition to looking for someone with great management skills and an interest, someone who has a passion for housing, looking for someone who's got a level of seniority and experience, working with a board that includes elected and appointed officials, as well as working within a municipal or county government.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, well, thank you for that update. Seeing no additional questions, we'll close Executive Director's comments and move to the consent calendar, which is just the minutes of November 4th. And I would entertain either a motion to adopt them or notes for edit.
I move to approve.
Give a second. I think, Rick, did you say second on mute?
I'll second.
Okay, great. So it's first from George, a second from John. Bethany, would you read the roll, please?
I can. I think Maddie's reading the roll.
Okay, sorry. Somebody. This is not my day for picking stuff up.
Okay. George.
Yes.
Skippy.
Yes.
John.
Yep.
Rick. Maybe on mute. Okay.
Could you repeat that name?
Okay, and
It's hard to
Carson.
hear.
Yes.
Great.
All right, that passes 5-0. And so we will move on from the consent calendar to discussion items. First thing up is the continued review of our 2021 work plan and long-term agenda. Just a little recap for the public. We started with a strategic plan, which is a multi-year vision, to a work plan. At the last meeting, we refined sort of the outline of what we want to tackle this year, and now we're looking at more of those detailed areas. So a few points of discussion here. The first one is staff asked for this check-in, but at our last meeting, guys and gals, we talked about the staff doing a pre-survey to sort of ask the community what things they do or don't want to be actively involved in, and if there are things that they or we feel like forward without active public outreach survey, that we were okay with that. That would still include public meetings, opportunity for comment, but staff just wanted to double confirm that that was our intention, which I believe it was. So I'm looking for a thumbs up that we agree to that. And if you could raise your digital hand to indicate agreement, we can check that off. And then if there's further discussion needed, we can get into that. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, I got Rachel, Rick, Carson, George, or Kelly. If it's easier for you to just speak up and say yes instead of the digital hand, that's fine. I just need to be able to see you.
Yes.
Okay, who's first?
Great. Oh, I'm sorry. You're raising your hand to talk about it?
Yes.
Okay, so great. So put your hands down if you're not raising to talk about it, so I can differentiate. And Rachel, you can jump in on that one.
Thank you. I appreciate trying to clarify because I've gotten really confused now. Are you saying we're just going to go ahead and have hearings by ourselves or with the public and start passing the guideline changes, the regulation changes, without going out to the public, or only picking which items we're going to go out? I mean, I got really confused by this memo today. When we met last week, we went over the concept of asking questions of the public and our own owners through a computer type of system. And now it seems like we've reversed course and we're just going to decide ourselves which ones to do without any public outreach? Right,
no, it's a good clarification. And Bethany, if you want to speak to this, you can. Otherwise, I'm happy to try and summarize. But I don't think it's be characterized. So Bethany, do you want to jump in?
Sure. So what our intention was is last year in 2019, we had presented these regulations to you all as future changes that were staff recommended changes. And then you all had a subcommittee which talked about what topics you wanted to actually take out to the public. From that list, I went through and said, okay, these were the 8 that you all wanted to talk about and get kind of public comment. That looked a lot different in 2019 than it's looking in 2020, or even in the beginning of 2020. And so basically what I want to make sure, and what the purpose of this is, hey, there is a lot of changes in here. Some are just cleanup, some are other changes, and then some are the changes that you all had identified that you wanted to request public feedback on. And so what I had talked to Skippy about last week and wanting to make sure that we're all clear on is that there are other changes in these regulations that are coming down the pipeline. They're the same ones that got sent out in September. Nothing new has been added in this document. It's just the idea that not everything in this document you all had identified as wanting to request public comment on. So before we moved much further, I wanted to make sure that we were in agreement on this same page, that the items of public comment that you wanted to go outside of a normal board meeting and outside of normal process to make regulation changes, we were all on the same page. And so that's what I'm looking for right now. So it's more an understanding that, hey, there's some more changes, but those weren't ones originally identified by you all as wanting that extra meeting where we had, an open house before time, probably a Zoom meeting.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the attempt at clarification very much, Bethany. I guess I am really even more confused because when there was a subgroup appointed to talk about the process on regulations, I thought they grouped into 8 major topics and were more determining a process of how we're going to reach out to the public, not limiting the topics or bringing them back to us to say we've limited these topics in these ways. I just thought we had kind of general pots under which topics were going, as opposed to limiting the topics. And I apologize for this as well, because it's really hard to have the Zoom on and the agenda and be able to go back through the memo at the same time. And I hate to make a city employee sit there for 2 hours while I'm on their computer and my computer. But, I saw the one that was suggesting that if you haven't applied for APCHA lotteries before retirement, you don't qualify. And that's not one we've ever really talked about as a group that I recall. And, it just struck me, what if you just lost your rental house and you never had to depend on APCHA before? But we're saying since you didn't apply for lotteries before, you don't qualify now, even if you've worked here for 40 years and you just lost your housing? Maybe you lost your housing in a divorce. Maybe you lost it through a lawsuit settlement. But to suddenly say people who've worked here for 40 years, if they haven't been playing the lottery pool for 5 years before they retire, they can't get in, that's a whole new twist to me. And I've known people who've lost their housing because it was demolished and being rebuilt after they stayed in a back closet for almost 40 years and never had to depend on APCHA housing. So again, I'm just seeing new things on the list that we might just institute without checking in with the public, and all these things change people's lives.
Rachel, by no means are we asking for any of these not to go through a formal process where APCHA staff presents the policy and presents the pros and cons and looks at the unintended consequences and then opens that up for you all to have discussion. This is merely the distinguishing factor of, am I going out to the public with survey questions on these topics to bring back to you, or is it just moving directly to you all, where you will have multiple meetings where people can call in and talk about these? By no means are we just saying, hey, this is in, without any discussion from you all, because that is hugely important in all of these topics. It is just...
Okay. Maybe I'm in a minority, but I don't know that I can have an informed discussion at the table without having heard from the public first. And we're hoping that the public will read our agendas where they're not even published in the paper and decide to come to a Zoom meeting to talk about something that affects their lives.
Well,
again,
Rachel, why
I'm
should we
okay with
give,
all the cleanups, but, if we're gonna go through the list one by one to say, public outreach, yes, board decide, no, we'll just put it on the agenda, let's send it out as a sheet and we can all check them off or something like that. It just starts to feel really awkward to me.
Okay, and I will say that I have received a couple phone calls this week about regulation changes and asking how people can participate. So it is out there. People are seeing it. I think they said they read it in the Aspen Times that those changes were happening. So at least I can tell you that some people are aware. I can't say that the whole community is aware, but at least the message is getting out there, and people are calling and asking how they can participate in these further discussions. So I just, at least, hopefully that eases some fears. I'm not saying.
Yeah, well, if we're moving away from the survey in the papers, I mean, I think we start to having public ads, what the rule is and what the board's going to discuss and what the proposed change is, even if they're not ones that are going to be in a public meeting. But I just, we keep talking about transparency, and I'm just not sure how we're really getting it.
And I'm not, sorry, Skippy, I'm just going to finish one more point. I'm not advocating for moving entirely away from a survey. I'm more advocating for the fact that we cannot survey this many questions and receive adequate responses. And so it's really looking at which ones are most important for us to go out to the public and get that initial feedback. And then the rest of them, we can have board meetings and do posts of whether it's on social media or whether it's in the papers or news flashes from APCHA and more discussion. It's just that general picture of how you want us to move forward.
Thank you.
Don, did you want to jump in?
well, no, I'm fine. I think ultimately you're, much like you sent out the questionnaire that we filled out about priorities, you can do that with these topics too, right? And then we can get feedback on what we need to go. I mean, I'm not sure I think giving somebody that's lived here for 40 years any more because they haven't played the lottery any more spots than just basically the time served in the housing. I mean, right? You get some benefit based upon how long you've lived in Aspen and what you can prove up. But any more kind of priority to me, you lost your housing. It happens. If you don't own your house, you're not in control of your situation. So.
Thanks, John. Kelly?
Thanks. Yeah. I guess I'm thinking about this similarly to like I would think about like code changes. I mean, there's the type of work that we're doing is not, we're not inventing anything. I think that we see a lot in like our planning departments go out and do comprehensive code changes on a fairly regular basis. And I guess I would just say maybe they have some offerings of best practice on how we might approach this. Like for the county, we would go out to caucuses and say, hey, here's an idea that we're talking about. What's your initial reaction to this idea? Or they'd go out and say, here's a long-standing thing we've been doing that we're thinking of making changes to. This is how we would, what changes do you think should be made, and start some feedback there. And so, I think that there are some best practices out there that maybe we're not tapping into when we think about how we should go about doing this. And I would just recommend that, we don't have to invent this. I think there's a lot of knowledge in this community about how to do this well, and that we should use that to inform how we refine our list and then how we go out with that list.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Does anyone else have any other? I have one question for staff, but does anyone else have any thoughts or questions first? Okay. Bethany, I just wanted to clarify before we ask people to sort of vote to move on or not here. As I understand what you just said, there are 10 items that we've started to rank for today's meeting. There are 3 additional that Kelly has added for consideration. And my understanding is that all 10 to 13 of those, if we choose to add those, will be part of this free survey. And that what you are asking is that those changes that are small and more sort of administrative in nature, that we had looked at before and decided that they may not need that higher level of public outreach, that those things can move forward through the normal meeting process, perhaps informed by best practices, as Kelly noted. Is that accurate?
Yes, I would say that's incredibly accurate. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page, all understood that there were more changes than these 10, possibly 13 that we were going to go out to the public and ask comments on before we move forward.
Thank you. George?
Yeah, thanks, Skippy. I was just going to say, it's interesting with Zoom now, we have the ability to actually reach a lot more people to enable them to participate than it would have in the past, because it's certainly easier for them versus having to come to a meeting. And so I think even with the administrative actions, those have to come before the board, and we can notify the public through various ways to let them know what's on the agenda, and let them during public comment or during if it's public comments for that agenda, be able to make comments. So it's I think Zoom is incredibly effective in terms of being able to reach a lot more people in terms of gathering input.
Thank you, George. Any other comments before I ask if we're okay moving in this direction with this clarity? Okay, seeing none, I will just ask again, if you're okay with moving forward like this, please raise your digital hand as a yes vote. I've got Rick, I've got Carson, I've got George, I've got myself. Okay, so I will take that as Kelly and Rachel and John are not in favor of this. Okay, can you guys confirm that is the case here, or speak up, because I don't see a hand? Just want to make sure.
No, I'm fine with it.
Wait to see how it plays out. I really don't fully understand how engaged we're going to get.
I'm fine with it, Skippy. I just couldn't find to raise my hand. But,
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, then staff, yes, we do have majority direction. What I also heard was some tentativeness from Rachel, which I think makes a lot of sense, and a request from Kelly to look into best practices from maybe code changes in other areas to guide that process. Does that make sense to you guys, staff?
Question, Skippy, sorry.
Yep.
So what I'd recommend at this point, and what Bethany has a kind of a first draft of, is that for the next board meeting, we come back and include in the packet some of the specifics that we think this board has discussed at length, and we think are either cleanup or they're in that category of the board took it to a point where it nearly got adopted, and ask you just those ones. Do you think those are the case, or should we add these into the survey? I think the intention is absolutely to still, as we discussed at the last meeting, to use the survey in several types, right? One is statistically significant because we can manage our own internal lists and send out those, and then other ones that will be qualitative, that would be newspaper, post on our website, post on our Facebook page, and we get initial public input on those pieces. So these two categories of, and Bethany's walked me through all these, and it's some of them are quite simply, this piece of this language appears in two places, and that from a code perspective, for example, that's bad practice in code. So we suggest removing one of them, and it doesn't change any of the substance. That is something the board actually has to vote on, but may not need to go to public input. And so really focusing on those ones and just letting you say, yes, those are things. Then using this survey, we'll take those elements and figure out how to add them into the survey, and then at the following meeting, bring you a draft. Is that acceptable, and does that get to some of the questions maybe?
If you guys could use your digital hands to agree to what Diane just said, so that I'm not characterizing her words. That seems okay to me, Diane. And to Carson, and to Rick, and to John. I know Rachel has some concerns. George and Kelly, is this okay with you, that direction? Yes, a yes from
Yeah,
Kelly.
it's fine. I mean, you know, we may decide to pull some of those off that list, so no problem considering it.
Yeah, let's just see how this process sort of works its way through. There may be some more questions and comments as we move through this.
Okay, perfect. Yes, and that sounds like a yes to that process. And I think we could, as Carson said, perhaps in preparation for that council meeting, create sort of that checkbox poll to start to flush some of that stuff out for the obvious yeses and those that are more in question.
Yeah, and Skippy, just from a being realistic perspective, I think providing those to the board with enough time for them to read through them, and then the intention is to do exactly what Kelly said. So you in the board meeting can go through them and say, yep, that one makes sense that we could take as a board, and we're not going to present you with any that we think are borderline. If there's something that we think, well, the board's talked about it a lot, we think there's general consensus, however it is a substantive change, we will recommend to take that one to the public. And so actually maybe, and Bethany's actually done a really nice analysis on this already. Maybe we'll show you one section of, we're recommending these don't go for comment and these do. I don't necessarily want to do a survey before both to give folks time, as well as processing that data is sometimes challenging.
Great. All right, thank you. All right, so a thumbs up moving forward on question 1. Question 2 in the work plan review is prioritization of our regulation review. Oh, sorry, George, your hand is up. Is that old hand or?
Oh, I was just going to ask staff is, you know, as we're setting up our agendas, and certainly as we're going to review some of these code changes, is it an easy ask to be able to send that out to all of our APCHA residents, or at least through the HOA, so that they know what's coming up for each APCHA board meeting? And that's just another way to, a lot of people don't look at the papers anymore, or if they do, it's on the e-editions. And so an advertisement may or may not be it may be able to complement a direct email if we have a email list to all of our residents, at least in APCHA housing.
Well, to me, that's where it needs to live, George. I mean, we got a mailing list, let's use it.
Well, an email list, right?
Yeah, I don't see a reason why we can't email this out to our current owners and tenants and kind of our distribution list that we have with a schedule. I think it would just be great if we had, we could email out more than one meeting, only so that we try not to email everyone too often.
No, we only have meetings every 2 weeks, so yeah. You just work through it. That's all. It's just it's a tool we should be utilizing.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving on to prioritizing proposed regulation change review. For the public's knowledge, the board has 10 things under current consideration, 3 additions that we will talk about. And the board ranked each of these from 1 to 10, most or least important. There are 8 board members, so a perfect score, an item where everyone rated it their #1 priority, would have been an 80, and the worst score, everyone rated it their last priority, would have been an 8. So what I'm going to do is just read the results of this board poll, and then we're going to discuss, does this seem good as is? I will invite board members to make initial comment on changes they want to propose if they have them. Then I'll ask staff to comment on this and propose their own potential changes. And then we'll work through trying to set a final priority by today. And none of this means any of these are not important or not getting done. It's just a matter of what's happening first, second, or third. So #1 with 57 cumulative points is capital reserves. #2 with 56 points is, should APCHA update the length of employment required before an individual is allowed to retire and maintain their housing? #3 with 53 points is, should the ownership exclusion zone be expanded? Number 4 with 47 points is right sizing. Number 5 with 43 points is should APCHA update the transfer of ownership policy to children or siblings. Number 7 is 36, and that is should APCHA create minimum salary that is specific to ownership units. Number 8, which have 35 points, is where is work? Number 9 at 32 points is should APCHA change the dependent age from 24 to 19? And number 10, also with 32 points, but lost the tie because it wasn't staff's recommendation, is what do we count for work hours? That's volunteer hours, nonprofit hours, community service, or the potential of rollover or other things. So what I would first do is just ask anyone who is comfortable taking this as is. Just that is going to be the order. I would just ask to raise your.
Do that again. I mean, lowest points should have been top priority, right? Or is that opposite?
It is the opposite.
So can you? I missed the top.
The top one was capital reserves, followed by length of employment before retirement. Should the ownership zone be expanded? Right sizing. Should APCHA change the way ownership policy for children or siblings is handled in terms of transfer? Should APCHA change the number of days a year a parent has custody of a child for a bedroom? Then should APCHA create minimum salary? Followed by where is work? Should APCHA change the dependent age from 24 to 19? And then in last place, what do we count for hours?
Thank you.
Yes. So I just ask anyone who's comfortable with this as is to raise their digital hand just so I can take tally of that. And you can't see my hand, but I will be raising it. All right, so I see Rick, John, myself, and Carson. Okay, so that leaves George, Kelly, and Rachel, who have changes that they would presumably like to see. So I would invite you guys to voice those for the rest of us to consider, and I will start with Rachel.
Skippy, I was just having a hard time finding my hand on the screen. I'm okay with the order, but I don't know exactly what we mean by capital reserves. I mean, I know we all need to tackle it, but, without examining a couple dozen or more deed restrictions and situations and what we can do, I mean, I don't know what we do with capital reserves. It's not a readily apparent guideline change that we can retroactively make on current owners. But I have no problem with that being, I have no problem with the order. Thank you.
Well, I think capital reserves is a bigger issue, Rachel. I mean, we saw somebody buying a unit today that's got poorly, I mean, I think capital reserves is more than just homeowners association capital reserves. This is independent ownership and turning, I mean, to me, this is a huge issue.
Yeah.
You saw it with taxes today, right? Like, it becomes up, whether it's allowing somebody to sell and move out of cancel the first buyer because they're not willing to buy a house that's in poor repair, but the second buyer is. To me, this is bringing adults to the table, adults to Aspen ownership housing, and adults to our instead of little kids that have no responsibility.
Ward, I'm not disagreeing with the priority. I just asked, what do we really do with it? I mean, that's what I asked. I don't disagree with the priority, but I'm asking, what do we do with it?
Thanks, Rachel. I think we're all in agreement on the seriousness, and what the board came to consensus on at the last meeting is that the known next process, because this is such a big issue, is that in these regulations, when staff is appropriately ready, step one will be that comprehensive history lesson of what has been done before, worked or didn't work. Step two will be to create some form of process. Step three, check in with BOCC and City Council for some agreement on process, and then begin that process. And for all the board members here, we did bring that up at a City Council work session, and City Council was receptive to that strategy.
Yeah.
So George and Kelly, I would welcome you guys to raise any thoughts on changes. And Kelly, I know you have additions, but let's start with changes if you have them. And if not, then Kelly will go to you for additions.
No, I didn't raise my hand fast enough. I think some of those for me that are grouped in the middle, you know, they could sort of be ordered in any which way and it wouldn't have made a whole lot of change for me. I kind of, that middle tier sort of just is all, this shares a level of, urgency as far as I'm concerned.
Awesome, thank you. George, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I was actually going just to defer to Kelly for hers. But having said that, I remember last meeting or so when we talked about some of all these issues. I thought we talked about, well, which ones can we sort of tackle fairly easily that would make an impact on the program. And we knew that capital reserves is that big one. That's the big project that's going to require a lot of time. And so for me, there were some of these other ones that I thought were more concerned to the people interested in getting into the program or people already in the program themselves that affect their lives immediately. So that would be my only comment. But knowing that we're not, the board's not going to be able to get through them all this year, you've got to prioritize. But I would sort of set capital reserves sort of on its own pedestal because that's a long ongoing process. And some of these other ones I think can be tackled much quicker through surveys, through input, through discussions.
Great. I think that's been widely shared, so I totally agree. That's a great comment, George. Kelly, did you want to speak to these potential additions and just kind of run them down for us, and then we can decide if and how we would want to layer them in?
Yeah, sure. And I have more to add based on checking in with my board today. But, these just reflect, I think, additional topics that we've heard over the last year. And so I didn't want them to necessarily go ignored, or if we're compiling a running list, I wanted to make sure they were on that list. And so, we've heard Carson is probably the best person to speak to this one, but should additional bid opportunities be given to people based on their duration of residency? So, if in every 5-year increment or something, does someone get another bid opportunity that puts them in a higher priority for the lottery? That's kind of what that's getting at. Should sales fees go up? We've had a conversation about going out and asking the public what they think about our fee structure, and particularly a fee like this that would really be the largest fee hit, I would say. And then should hours be averaged over multiple years? I think Rachel brought this up as a consideration many moons ago, but similarly to how APCHA will average income if there's a 20% discrepancy from year to year, should we consider if hours should be averaged? For example, if somebody has a temporary disability, a major accident that precludes them from work, so that, that adjustment can help ensure someone maybe doesn't get kicked out of their house because they broke their leg and couldn't work for 6 months. Something along those lines. So those are a couple for consideration. And again, the staff should weigh in on whether these should rise to the top for consideration. And then other ones I heard from our board today were how we can help support first responders being able to, have higher priority in accessing the system, which I believe they already do, but effectively there's still an issue with some first responders being able to get into APCHA housing and therefore, for example, be able to provide community policing because they're not actually living in our communities. They have to live so far away. And then another one was... Sorry, let me look down my list here. When looking at income qualifications, if a percentage of health insurance costs could be deducted from income, the income qualification, so that people aren't kind of put in a situation of like, well, if I dropped my health insurance, then I'd be able to afford this unit, was brought up for consideration as well. And that's sort of the first time I heard of that. And then we heard from our callers today, efforts to look at standards for sellers. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Let me ask you a question. I think your number 3, the should hours be averaged, is at least partially captured in number 10, which under rollover hours. It may be slightly different. Would you be comfortable making that in addition to that sort of subsection?
Yeah, I'd almost rather just pull the rollover out of the other consideration, but because looking at volunteer, nonprofit, community service hours sort of clumped together better than averaging hours for qualification for a life circumstance. But
okay, great, thank you.
That's my opinion on that.
George.
Yeah, one other one, just to piggyback off of the qualifications, which I mentioned last meeting, was to look at what counts as assets and equity. So, for example, people who are putting monies away in their Roths or their IRAs, is that working against them, where it should be working for them in the long term? Are we penalizing people for contributing into their IRAs or into the Roths, which makes them perhaps not able to apply for certain units?
Sorry, I'm dealing with 5.
Stephanie's got a hand raised, I think.
Sorry, Skippy, I can't find my raise hand button right now. I just want to touch base on 2 things. One, I think the best way to go about hours worked would be to have a big category, and then underneath it, we can either loop volunteer hours and other pieces together, and then have another part on rollover. I just think it makes sense to look at it all at one time. So that would be my recommendation coming from staff, to kind of look at it in its entirety. I'm happy to add some emergency worker information. Right now, our emergency workers, as long as their supervisor fills out a form, they get top priority in our rental units that they qualify for. And then as for sales unit ownership perspective, they have to have worked in their job, I'm reading the regulations right now, for 1 year, and then they're allowed to enter the lottery just like they have 4 years. So we do give emergency workers a leg up in the system, both from getting into rental and getting into ownership. Happy to look at it further and add in some more pieces if we need to down the road. Just wanted to provide that as George, we do deduct out some retirement savings so that does not penalize you from a category perspective. We are actually working on a document that has not been included in these regulation changes that is going to be an overview of how we calculate income, and we're going to actually get it out in the regulations so that it's a little bit clearer and a little bit more out there for public to see. And so that is coming. That is separate from everything we've just been talking about and kind of regulation pieces.
Okay.
Thank you. Kelly, can you just, hearing that, does that change any of your suggestions in any way?
I'm not like married to these suggestions. I'm really just trying to get like a running list here. So,
okay, all right.
I will say that I know, at least in the county, we're struggling with our first responders being able to access APCHA housing. So that's a problem that we as an organization have to solve. But, I do think there's a community element to that too, if we, want to value public safety officers differently. And I know that gets into bigger questions about who do you pick and who do you don't, and that sort of things. Yeah. So.
And I'm seeing a big nodding head from the only person I can see on my screen right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what I heard there was a couple things. I wanted to reflect back to you guys, but I heard sort of 4 additional categories. One is should fees go up? 2 is what counts for asset or income, right? So that's the healthcare as income or good debt on the asset side, those kind of discussions. 3 would be should additional bid opportunities be given for duration of residency or qualification? And 4 is who should get priority, if anybody, and how? And I did, at staff's recommendation, Kelly, move your question about hours just into that bucket, if that is okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
So is there anyone who heard those 4 additions differently? I'd ask that you pop in now. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I just want to say, I'm willing to talk about priority, but boy, is that a tough one. You know, the city has been spending a lot of money building housing for its first responders and the police, and I know the county hasn't been in that same position, but, you know, if we were to start to say, okay, now all the critical water department responders have to have priority, now all the critical electric department workers who are dealing with life and death issues always as well, and the Aspen police and the ambulance district all start to have priority in our program, I'm not sure who else is going to get to rent. And then we start ranking people as well, teachers and this and that. And I know we had at least one circumstance prior to your time on the county, Kelly, where someone had gotten priority for a rental because they were working for the dispatch, and then they shifted to a different job in the county and they lost their housing. You know, so it's like, how many years or how long does that priority even hold for you? So I'm just saying that's a can of worms, and I wouldn't want to say that, hey, all of my city employees can start having priority over there because they're essential.
And I understand that, Rachel. I do get that. I want to honor my board too by just bringing forward
I
their
understand.
concerns.
I just had to say that we had had a list of more people who are qualified than we have units pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm going to make a pitch that we have a ton of rental units available at our properties. So if people are looking, we are trying to fill rental units right now out at Truscott. So,
I check the website every day. And it says no rental units available.
We are working through our list from the last time that we advertised, and so we might have to republish because we are going through that list. But we do have units available.
Bethany, I appreciate that, and it's on our agenda to make sure we get a check-in from staff on all of this. So I just want to get to the point where the board is aligned here, and then let you come in, and then the board can decide if they want to make amends or not. Let me just ask this then: is there anyone who would like to speak up to not include any of these additions? I'm not saying where this will go, if it'll be first or last. It could be 2 years from now. But is there anyone who would like to make a case that any of these not be entertained?
I would just jump in and I'll just simply say that I'm in agreement with Rachel on the priority. I think if we're given priority in rental units, I think that's fair.
Okay. Then just hearing at least 2 voices, I would ask that people raise their digital hand if they are supportive of the board engaging on prioritization. I see Rachel. Oh, I see Rick. And I see Carson. So Carson, you are in favor of this, and Kelly. Okay, great. So guys, what I'm hearing is that all 4 of these things should be considered. We've gone through a prioritization process. So let me ask the question this way. The easiest option is simply to tack these on to the end. Is there anybody who would like to make a case that one or more of these should be moved up into the sort of top 10, or are we comfortable with them sitting at the end of the line? Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the case that I think that this standards for sellers, this has broad implications, much broader than some things like looking at retirement age, custody days, things like that. And then also the fees, because, we need to just continue to be, I think, a financially astute organization, and that this, if we're gonna consider that for this next year, we need to ask the public about it.
I appreciate that. Okay. Hearing that, looking, not seeing any other comments, what I'd like to do is go to staff. Staff, if you could weigh in on our existing prioritization. If there are areas you think there should be changes, I'd ask that you make that case. And then I'd also ask that you give some comment to those two areas that the board may move up that are new, which are should sales fees go up and should there be standards for sellers. If you could give us a recommendation for where those would fit in these lists. And standards for sellers, I would also ask if you see that as a standalone or if that is part of that broader capital reserves and maintenance question. And I would turn it over to you.
So I'm just going to start, Bethany, with this prioritization is helpful from the perspective of these are things that the board says these are important. It's a good window into, and it's a confirmation, I think, of recent discussions about what's important to the board in discussing. That being said, I don't think as a staff we have to go through every one of these, because what I think is going to happen is at the next meeting, we're going to bring you two categories of, we're going to give you the hard copy regulation changes. We're going to say, these ones we think are like cleanup and super basic, and are you comfortable adopting those? And this is the list that we're going to work on over the holidays to develop, refine the survey that Bethany started, and do the additional pieces that you requested, like give examples, etc. Give you that list, and then where I think this is really going to come into play is when you get that survey back. So we're going to use this list to make sure we can say, yes, we've got so there are some things here that do not necessarily show up in the regulations now. We will bring you a question after the holidays that says, here's a question on this one, do you want to include it in the survey? Then this will come back into play when you get the results of the survey, you start processing through it, and this prioritization may change based on what you see from public input, right? You might see some things that you say, wow, the public seems to agree with what the board said before. Maybe we can take those and take those quickly and get them adopted. And wow, this one had a lot more debate and a lot more differing opinions than we've seen before. Maybe we should bring that up in priority. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And I think that some of these might get stricken because of that pre-survey and things will move up. What I want to make sure staff is comfortable with is, even in that instance, for example, number 9, should the APCHA change for dependent from 24 to 19, that's one that staff has highlighted as a priority. And so whether stuff gets struck or not, with this, it will be later. So are there areas where staff just wants to make a case that things should be bumped up the list regardless of what happens in that survey? We just want to make sure we're hearing you now.
I will say that I think a very important one to look at is what we've all kind of talked about and agreed on, is looking at maximum sales price based upon condition of unit. So I think that is an important one that we talk about. I think should the sales fee go up? I think that's important. I know that we have in the past talked about doing a fee study, a comprehensive fee study, and looking at all the fees, and I think that is separate. And we can look at that as a separate piece and work that through the work plan to get that scheduled and get kind of a comprehensive look on that. And I think a lot of what staff had brought forward was conversations that we'd had with the public and phone calls that we've received or compliance complaints that we received regarding certain things. So that's why you saw some of these on the list. But as of right now, I think we're okay. I'd like to, continue this conversation as we move forward. So.
Okay, so I'm hearing that the staff is okay with the board prioritization of 1 through 10 as it is on this survey.
Yes, and I will. My caveat to that is there were pieces that we said, we need to have at least 1 or 2 board meetings
Yep.
prior to any discussion, because we have nothing drafted, or we don't necessarily know what the
So that's
direction
what's
of the
showing up
board
on
is that you would
GrassRoots.
like to go. And so that would be the, just so that expectation is very clear. Some of these regulations have been drafted. That by no means means they're final, but they've been drafted. And some of these have not been topics brought up by you all, and staff will need guidance on further discussion about them.
Understood. So question from the board to you is, we've just highlighted should sales fees go up as maybe more important than number 11. Do you have a place that you would recommend this live between 1 and 10?
So I think this should sales fees go up. That should be brought into a larger fee study. I think I'm going to have to talk offline and look at our strategic plan and figure out where we can work that into the work to make sure that is getting done. I do think it's important. I think it's been something that we've been talking about for a while, but that is going to be a bigger discussion separate from necessarily these topics, which are more tied to the regulations. And I know fees are in the regulations, but it's just going to be a bigger topic.
Kelly, are you okay with that response, or would you prefer to see this particularly called out in an area at a particular
No,
time?
I think that makes sense.
Okay, great. And then Bethany, the other one that we asterisked here was standards for sellers. Do you have a recommendation of where in 1 to 10 that should live?
I think that's incredibly important right now. So I think that is a part of it. That's I think what a lot of folks were looking at from a capital reserve perspective. And I think that's a very important discussion to have. We're seeing a lot of units right now over the past 6 months that have transferred hands that are certainly in need of some repairs. And so I think it's right. It's time for the conversation.
Great. So then I'll turn that question to the board, because when I heard that suggestion, I thought, great, but I thought that kind of fits into the capital reserve thing. So the question I would ask is, and please, I can't see you guys, just raise your hands, but does anyone have input on, should that just generally be part of the capital reserve discussion, or should that be called out as separate and prioritized perhaps sooner? John Ward.
And I kind of thought, when I see capital reserves, I see that as all encompassing. Like I said, I think it's bringing adults to the table, or holding our owners accountable for what they own and what they maintain. So.
Great. Carson?
Yeah, so, I mean, I a couple of thoughts. I think, one, I mean, so like what we heard tonight, there's existing regulations already in place that we could enforce a lot of, like the safety hazards, the holes in the drywall, that sort of stuff. I mean, we should already be enforcing those before people are allowed to sell. And, one of the thoughts that I had that might be an easy change, at least initially, is, before somebody is allowed to even list a property for sale, maybe they have to give an inspection to confirm there's no safety hazards, or, basically anything that already meets our existing regulations. I mean, I can tell you, on my house that I bought, there were issues there that you could argue violated a couple of those things, and I got, the comment was, well, if you don't want it, we'll just go to the next person on the list. So I think it should definitely be a high priority, but I think we should also just make sure we're enforcing what's already on the books.
Okay, so just to clarify, Carson, should that piece go ahead of any other capital reserve, or should it be part of, but maybe early on in?
I think it's part of capital reserves, because you start getting into HOAs, and there's all sorts of considerations, because what if a place has a terrible roof, but it's part of an HOA? So I think it goes along with capital reserves, but understanding that capital reserves that's a big bite. I think that piece maybe gets peeled out and done first.
Okay, thank you. Rick, you're on mute. Rick, you're still on mute.
I agree with Carson. I think this is one of some urgency, and I would put it right at the top of our list of things to attack, even though it's in conjunction with capital reserves. I think it's very important, as this couple spoke tonight. I mean, there's a perfect example of how urgent this should be.
Okay, I'm hearing pulling out ahead is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what everyone has said. I'm just wondering, do we get who is going to be our legal counsel? And I don't mean, obviously, Tom, you're there, and I'm not saying you're not, but there's a lot of, what can we require versus what a homeowner says, that's not my deed restriction, you can't require it from me. And, so I want to tackle this. I'm not, please understand whenever I say there's a complication, but I was thinking before that maybe just for information purposes, we could send out a copy of our current deed restriction that any new resales are using and see what provisions are in there that really give us the leverage and the power to require certain things. As everyone on the board knows, the challenge is you could have a unit that's turned over 5 times in the past 15 years, and is it the most recent buyer who's been there 6 months who's going to sell, who's now responsible for all the carpets no one replaced before them? And how do you have a fairness so you're not trying to say, okay, you have to do a credit of $5,000 for repainting and carpets out of your sale proceeds, and then say, thank you very much, I'll see you in court because I don't think you have the power to reduce my price for those things. So I'm just saying we need some real legal expertise behind crafting these rules and take a real look at the fairness issues.
Rachel, just a comment. There are standards of habitability that are already in our codes and almost every real estate transaction. And as long as somebody meets those standards, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, me too. I'm just saying if we're not already inspecting and holding people to those standards and we have that legal ability to, I don't know why we're not. But it's been my impression that we haven't been able to do much about that. And that's why these people are in that circumstance, the new buyers.
Well, it also brings up an additional issue of hiring, who is going to be the standard of an inspection person? I mean, do we have to hire a bevy of inspectors, and hopefully they have the same standards collectively. So that's another issue.
Thanks.
Skippy, just for a second, Skippy, I just wanted to say, I want to make sure that we have time to make sure we get through all the items on the agenda. This is a hugely important one. Bethany and Tom and I probably spent 30 minutes on it today, specifically talking about what you're talking about. Which deed restrictions can we enforce? What's in the regulations that we're able to enforce? Can we start nibbling at the extremes and work on this? So this is absolutely one we can craft and bring back to the board. I've heard very strongly from the board that yes, it falls under the category of capital reserves, but we want to pull it out and have it be its own issue that we tackle, and probably sooner than the other ones. And I think the perspective that Bethany and Tom and I had today was, even if we can't solve it all, starting to solve some of it and address some of it is hugely important.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too as well, Diane. I did see Carson and John's hands up. So do you guys have anything different than that to add, John?
No, I was going to say we're getting into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, totally agree.
So.
Okay, great. Well, so what I've heard is what Diane said, which we can pull this out separate, even as part of capital reserves, and move this up near the top of the list for review. Tom, I do see your hand there, but I think we've got uniform opinion from the board, and we're going to have time to delve into all the details of this. So is there anything that's still absolutely burning for you?
No.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, guys. Question before we agree, hopefully, and then move on, which is we started this meeting about 15 minutes late. Are you guys okay with going 15 minutes over to get our full 2 hours?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so then guys, what I've heard, I'll try to reflect here, is that our incoming prioritization of 1 through 10 makes sense. Capital reserves is going to be its own thing and will be layered in throughout the process. We've added a few categories at the end, which include what counts as asset or in, should additional bid opportunity be given based on duration of residency or qualification, and should and who should get priority. And then in addition to that, standards for sellers will be part of that capital reserve discussion, but moved up near the top of the prioritization. And lastly, that should sales fees go up, will be considered, but it will be considered separately by staff as part of a larger fee study. Does that make sense to everybody? And please raise your digital hand if it does and you're supportive. I've got Rick, Carson, John, Rachel, George, myself, and Kelly. So yes, we are totally on board there. Staff, thank you guys for helping us go through that. The question is, do we need a formal vote on that, Diane, or is that hand poll sufficient?
We're good.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
That feels really good. So we'll come back with a long-term plan based on this, and thank you guys all so much for that. I'll turn to our second discussion item. Hopefully this is quick. This is, let's see, what page in our packets? Well, it's the...
Page 7?
Okay, thank you. Page 7 in our packet. So this was just George asked that we bring this forward. Recommendation for APCHA board meetings. I hope that you guys had a chance to review this. And basically what this reflects is your ideas for how we can improve meeting flow, packets, et cetera. And I just wanted to have an open discussion here about anything that stood out to anybody or was of import or concern. You'll notice that most of these are not changes to the agenda or anything hard. They're more soft approaches that could improve the meeting. So I just welcome any input. And George, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if that was from before or not, but jump in if you like.
That was an earlier one, so I don't have any comments.
Great. Does anyone else have any comments or thoughts? Okay. Well, I just would like to say that it is an absolute pleasure to be on a board with 7 thoughtful, committed individuals who really dug in and brought a lot of expertise forward, and it's just honestly just an honor to serve with you guys. So that's all I wanted to say. Kelly.
Yeah, I would just ask, I think maybe just a slight change, being that the chair check-in with, oh, sorry, we're having issues over here. Can you hear me now? Okay, cool. So I would ask, I guess, based on the changes presented, that the chair maybe check in with the board after public comment to see if there's any comment that the board would like to make in relation to that public comment that was heard. Because I just continue to have concerns that if our comments come all the way at the end, that the public, as we can see now, who we've heard from, are not on the phone any longer, and they don't get to hear from us. So, I would ask that, and I'm fine to give my updates on Pitkin's efforts on housing and all that kind of stuff at the end of the meeting, if that's what the board agrees to. But I do think it would be helpful for the chair to check in and see if anyone wants to weigh in on public comment that they've heard. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kelly. And absolutely, during comment or any other time, if I see a hand up, I will, of course, check in with the board. John.
Yeah, I was going to just agree with Kelly. I think there should be a spot for, rebuttal, reiteration, clarification, whatever you want to call it, from some unadulterated, unmitigated, unrelaxed, or unchecked public comment.
100%. And any time a hand is up during public comment, I will make sure that you have the opportunity to offer that clarification. So 100% on board. Great. Hearing that, we will close the discussion items, part of our work session, and move to APCHA board members' comments. If any of you guys have anything to share, please raise your hand and I will call on you. And I first. George, you have a comment?
Oh, okay, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry.
A question for staff. It becomes just timeliness for our next board meetings. Do we have 1 or 2 board meetings scheduled in December? I know this one is December 2nd. Do we have another one?
I believe it's just the one. Is it in the back of your packet?
That's correct.
December
We
2nd?
only have one.
Correct.
Okay, so if that's the only one, what I would ask the board to consider is moving that December 2nd board meeting to December 9th. December 2nd, we have a regular BOCC meeting that could be very lengthy because there'll be discussion perhaps on the airport. Today we had to cut our meeting short to get to APCHA at 5 o'clock. So if we only have one meeting in December, will December 9th work for the board, moving it from December 2nd?
Diane, we don't have a meeting any other time in December, just to clarify. Sorry, I was getting my calendar out.
That's correct.
Okay. Does anybody, anyone who has an issue with that, please speak up?
Works for me.
Works for me as well.
Works for me.
Great, thank you.
Diane, that works for you guys?
You have to be really nice because I have a Wheeler board meeting that runs the 2 hours prior to that. Just go easy on us.
How would you characterize our current level of niceness, 1 to 10?
I don't know. It depends on how many hours it takes me to get through what our list after the meeting.
Okay, awesome. All right, so everyone can notate that in their calendar, and I know staff will send out something. So back to board members' comments. Rachel.
You're muted.
Prior to the last discussion, I was going to ask that we go ahead and send out one of the current copies of the deed restriction that we use on resales, so we can all take a look at those sections related to maintenance and see if we have some ideas for how those should be beefed up or whether we think they're sufficient. But it's just the information item, not an agenda item. Thank you.
Staff, is that something that can happen?
Sorry, I caught most of that, and then I forgot what it was. Sorry.
I was just asking, is it possible to send out a copy of our current deed restriction? And if you want to highlight or put on the top of the memo where you think the sections that deal with capital reserves or standards for selling a home, that'd be helpful, and we can all take a look. Thank you.
Yes, and do you want that in the packet, or you want that to send it out like next week?
I just send it out next week as just information item. Thank you.
Great.
Kelly?
Yeah, thanks. You can't get through a meeting without mentioning COVID. So I do want to just recognize that, we're going into a place of more restrictions, and to remind people that the county continues to have an economic assistance program that functions year-round, that tends to see more applicants in the off-season, and for the public to know that continues to be available to them, should they experience work reduction, problem paying bills, concerns about rent, HOA, mortgage fees, etc., to reach out and request assistance from those programs, because again, they are active all year long. And yeah, everyone stay safe and healthy, and happy Thanksgiving.
Kelly. Anybody else for board member comments? Okay.
I wanted to say thanks to Tom, thanks to the process that we're going through. It's going in the right place. We did make changes to our regulations, but ultimately that was to allow the option of a fine, but not to. I mean, there was still the option of the death penalty, essentially. So Tom's been working hard. We're working forward on certain cases, and I think he's done a great job. So thanks.
Thanks, John. Okay. Diane, walk me through the process here. Do we take a vote to adjourn and then we just wait a few minutes for GrassRoots to drop off, or how does this work with the executive session?
You're gonna make a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session to obtain legal advice from APCHA's attorney in accordance with CRS 24-6-4024B for a conference with the authority's attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions for the legal case APCHA v. Mulcahy 2015 CV 01350.
I'll second.
All right, I'm so glad you guys know more of this than I do. Staff, would you read the roll?
She said for you to read the roll.
Maddie,
He said
could
for
you
you to
read
read the roll.
Yes, I can read the roll. Skippy,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
John,
Yep.
and Carson.
Yes.
Okay. So, if you can give me like 5 minutes, I am going to make sure all the members of the public are outside the meeting and GrassRoots is off. And then I will let you know when we are all ready to come back, okay? So just give me like 5 minutes.
Do the rest of us
Great.
remain on this link? Okay.
Let's all be back at 6:45. You got 6 minutes to check out your legs, go to the restroom, get some water, and continue. Thank you all, and thank you to all those in the public who are watching.